Well, Lila, thank you so much for having this conversation with Angus and me. We're both really excited to have you with us.
So excited. Yeah, it's good to see you.
Oh, so
And
nice
for
to
those,
see
welcome. And for those of you in the group, many of you probably already know who Lila is, but just in case you don't, Lila is co-director and partner in One Thought with her husband, Aaron Turner. And she's also founder of Relationship Ready. And I've heard from several people who participated in her Relationship Ready programs, getting people ready for relationships, as the title says, how powerful and amazing they are. So just want to give a big shout out to that. And Leila and I were having a conversation, or maybe it was over email. And I was telling her about how Angus and I have created this rewilding community and how we're using the metaphor of rewilding in our work. And she said, you know, I've been looking in that direction too, and that's been coming up for me in my relationship work. So we thought it would be great to have her here to discuss what she's seeing in that direction, but also lots of other things. Lila is very diverse in her interests in terms of the body, in terms of diversity, in terms of the environment, as well as all of the profound work that she does in just helping people tap into their innate potential. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I thought we were going to spend this time duking it out as to who owns the rights of rewilding. Who can
you.
put the most compelling argument forward?
You have a no. It's I love the website picture you've done. It looks gorgeous. I want to go take a nap in those woods.
That's right. And also, I wanted to mention just Leila has a very special place in my heart because many of you probably heard about that intensive that I did, where I was really impacted by the understanding and finally saw that it was something different than I had been doing and was like profoundly changed. And Leila was there. She was there with Linda Pransky, and so she kind of was a big inaugural part of me being impacted by the three principles. So thank you for that, Leila. It was fun.
And thank you from me, because Rahini changed significantly.
Oh,
As did our relationship.
That's right.
As did I. You're the gift that keeps on giving.
oh, that's so cool. Well, I got to give it somewhere. I don't know if my family would say that. The positive giving maybe over here, but that's great.
Yeah.
No, it was a profound moment. That was the moment that in that last day, in that last session was the moment I decided I just wanted to spend whatever time I had looking in the direction of whatever I call it, whatever that is, because something was so obvious in that feeling in that last session. I don't know if I ever told you the story. If I told you the story, remember I came in a really bad mood.
Yeah, go ahead though. It's a great story.
It's a funny story. It was I would started sitting in on work. So I was training. I was brand new. I was still doing children's wear, high-end children's wear design. So I come from a fashion background and had discovered something for me, which was that there was a soft part of me that I didn't live in. It happened by accident at a conference. I would say the only thing I did was not listen to my chatter for 3 days and fell into something really beautiful. And so I got interested in the work just to kind of, I thought if I could live 5% in this feeling, I would be thrilled. That's kind of what I was looking for in terms of training. But I'd watched Aaron and I'd watched enough people because they trained students. I knew that if I worked with clients that it would go deeper, and I didn't know why, but I knew my understanding would go deeper. And quite selfishly, I wanted to live in a nicer feeling because it looked like a sort of table tennis game with iron ping pong balls otherwise. And the last day, I really loved the whole intensive. So I was sitting in, so Linda was working with you, and you know, we would chat together as a group, but generally you guys were having the conversation, and I'd really loved where we're getting, and I don't know where my understanding was at, probably some enjoying the intellect of it, but I could see things were happening. But on the last day, I just, nothing to do with this. I came in a really foul mood. I was just looking a grump, you know, you kind of wanted to, you know, spit at everybody, you know, you just a little bit. coffee doesn't taste good. I'm sure the weather's bad. It was just kind of sulky. And I showed up to try and listen the best I could, but I was basically in a bit of a cloud, and Linda asked you to talk about what you'd seen. And this is my experience of it. So, you'd got really impacted over the time. And you'd got into this really beautiful feeling. And then when she said, well, tell me what you've learned, this is what it looked like to me, really, is that you kind of traveled up out of that and kind of went up the elevator into your head to try and get it together.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like, oh shit, it's like the headmaster's here or something. And so, and then she said, no, which was fabulous. She said, no, stay where you are. So you kind of went down. And what was so cool is you kind of, I think what's beautiful about when you really are in new understanding, it's always lumpy, super awkward, and elbows and knees, and like it's like learning a new language but not caring if you get it right. So you started to speak, and as you spoke from that feeling, your feeling kind of got more something, and then something in me literally came out of my chest and woke me up and dragged me out of my mood. And I was suddenly, literally, and I would say involuntarily, I was like, kind of like, my moods are a thing. I'm literally involuntarily sitting in this feeling of this room, and I could feel, because my intellect had no grasp, that something had happened and that I was part of something, and something was everywhere, something. And I remember thinking, whoa, whatever this is, I want to study that. And I still do call it that business. It's like, what is that? I don't know. I could call it 1,000 things, purple if you like. It's incredible. It was just incredible. And that was the moment where I went, okay, I'm in. Just meaning I was a student from that moment. I was like, in. Very cool.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a powerful, intense.
My goodness, it sounds like it.
Yeah, so very grateful, and just we got to co-facilitate a small group after that sometime. So we've had some adventures together and really enjoyed it. So, where would you like to start, I guess? Do you want to start with the body? Is that what you're interested in?
Yeah, I'm just, as I'd love to be just a student around what in terms of how there is this intelligence in the body. So much of this understanding, I think about the relationship with thought and emotions and anxiety, and then there's this whole other component to it, how we interact with our body. I guess I'm pretty naive on that front. And I know that, that you've been studying that fairly extensively from what I can gather. And I don't even know what terms to use. Would be kinesiology? Is that something that?
Yeah, so there's kinesiology is very common. So Ulf Kilman, who we studied with for a long time and trained with and are still training with, studied kinesiology, but realized there were deeper questions not being asked. So he developed a system called holographic kinesiology, meaning you go all around. It's like, so you take in, I guess, you ask deeper questions, I guess. I don't know how to describe it other than it's really profound. But sorry, were you still talking, Angus? Did I interrupt?
No, not at all. No.
No, and so so my story, when I first met him, Aaron came across him. Actually, he'd been asked to speak in Sweden for a client had asked him to go over and speak, and this guy's really into health, and Aaron and I have always been into health, and he just liked the sound of this guy, and he said, I want to meet him. So Aaron came back from Sweden. He eventually went and got to meet Ulf and have a treatment with him. And he came back, and I've been telling Aaron to give up wheat for about 10 years. He had these circles under his eyes, and he goes, someone says the guy should give up wheat. And I'm like, great, a man had to tell you. I love that. That's fantastic. But he came back and said, you got to meet him. And I'm like, I don't want to go meet some. I had a bit of a sassy attitude, nesting a pattern here. So eventually he says, look, I really want, there's something special about him. He's doing something he's doing something different. And we'd had Neuralink people for many, many years. That had been our go-to because it was like the most precious thing we'd come up against at that time. And so we go and we pull into their driveway and we're getting out the car. Nice to meet you. And I'm feeling pretty healthy in myself, but he goes, oh, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. And he goes, oh, you first, and points to me. You could just tell. And I didn't realize I was quite unhealthy at the time, even though I was technically doing a lot of things, good things on paper. And what's interesting, if I look, I've been a raw foodist, I've been a yoga teacher, I've been, I've done most, quite not most, but a lot of fasting. I've done lots of things, and they're always written on paper, a good idea, so you do it. Mm-hmm. So I had rituals like lemon water in the morning, and I did and I didn't drink during meals because I just had like invisible, endless rituals. And he basically wiped all that away because he said the body knows, and you have to ask the body. So there's this deep intelligence to the body. And I'm going to skip forward to when we actually eventually ended up training properly in his approach. He sits on the bench. So you've got these like sort of massage tables, and he sits on there and he goes, this is his first words out of his mouth: the body is amazing. And I'm like, I literally sat back in my chair and went, holy shit, I don't start with that. Like, I know mind is there, but I don't start with that. Like, it just because he knows. So he's very strict with you. So when he trains, so he has a system of asking the body. So they found through muscle testing that lemon doesn't tend to work. Lime is better because they don't have a theory. He just says it doesn't work. The body doesn't like it. For most people, all the people he's tested. So I said, well, at the time, coconut oil was the fad. It was literally in everything. We're all saturated in coconut oil, right, at one point. And I said, oh, do you cook with coconut? He goes, no. He said, because the biology, the testing out there is, in theory, molecularly, it doesn't go bad when you heat it. He says, no, I muscle tested it. All the coconut oils I try, they test bad. So they test olive oil is better. So that all these theories of what you should do get wiped away when you just ask the question, does it work or not in the body? And what just really blew my mind is that I see that he works with the mind in the body. And he gets you to listen. Like, if you were doing a treatment in his room in your training and you don't listen to the body, he comes over and kind of gets in your face. He's like, no, you listened to, you asked. So it'd be like you guys, if Ross, like if you said, what would you really love to do on a date? And she said, oh, really love to go to the cinema and eat cookies and watch a rom-com. And he said, great, let's go out car racing. It's like the body doesn't like that. You asked its opinion, so don't ignore it. It's like he really treats. He's like, if you ask it, you listen. You get really respectful because the body has a very, very deep intelligence, and it knows what you need. So this whole treatment that we learn to do, you find out what the problem is, you find out that like a problem A and a problem B, and what's the priority. I mean, it's quite a long process, but really what you do is you get the body back in communication with itself. We all know what it's like to run around frantic in what we would call an unclear state of mind. Well, he talks about that in terms of being in communication with itself. So when you are like uneven from food or shoes, your body can't hear itself. It kind of breaks the circuit of communication. And it gets it back into communication, so it knows how to solve things when it's in communication with itself. I mean, I could literally spend the whole time talking about it, but he's absolutely incredible. He works with his wife, Charlotte, and they both have incredible systems working with the body and the mind. They're amazing. So it blew my mind that you could work, because I had picked up that there was... that I do, in terms of your question, is that I do think that when I get agitated, my asthma gets worse, and when I get quiet, it goes. And I'm like, well, that's interesting, because I know it's biological, but how much when they come together is dictated. And I know from listening to Bill Pettit, it's like people will turn on and off genes depending on the stress state they're in. And Ulf will say the same thing. It's like the level of consciousness that your body has, depending on, your health. If you're getting your body unhealthy, then it listens to your unhealthy genetics and vice versa. But I hadn't really thought of the body having mind. I kind of thought, well, I know that my head is dictating a lot of what happens in my body, but I didn't know you could talk to the body with such certainty. It just knows. So, I mean, I don't know if you have any questions about it, but it's kind of, I've never met anyone like him. He's endlessly humble. He will never say, I know the answer. He'll investigate, he'll ask the body. So he doesn't have a theory for what's good. He says, well, that tends to test bad, or that never tests good. Or it might test good for somebody, but he's very humble with that. So he's an endless student of his own philosophy, I guess.
Yeah, one of the thing, I mean, we're using this rewilding metaphor, and it's something that, that we came across when we saw this George Monbiot, this biologist, he's the guy, I don't know if he was the guy who introduced the pack of wolves into Yellowstone. And I don't know if you're familiar with that movie or documentary, where with the introduction of these wolves back into this park over span of 5 years, the whole ecology goes back to its natural state of balance and harmony. So we've used that as a reference point, and I've used it as a reference point when I do a group at a treatment center 1 day a week, and I often use that video as a launch pad to sort of suggest that the business that you refer to, that sort of the intelligence behind life, let's say, I'm assuming that's maybe one and the same thing, that we are kind of designed in the same way that the natural world is designed to seek out balance and harmony. It wouldn't be much of a leap to think your psychology would probably be subject to the same conditions. But then for me to sort of really think about it in terms of the body and the intelligence in the body, and we only have to look to the body to see that there are all these incredible systems that will recover it back to its natural state of balance and harmony. And you're taking a deeper dive on that. So for me, that's just like, wow, isn't it interesting to sort of, yeah, absolutely, you can look to the natural world, but we don't even have to look that far. We can look to our own human system as this incredibly designed piece of equipment that's constantly, looking for balance and harmony. It's designed for success. It's designed to flourish, and everything about it is set up that way. So I love what you're saying, because it's just more grist for the mill, as it were, in terms of like, we're set up for success, and we just, I don't know, is that us following our instincts, getting more in tune with our body? I use that term instinct all the time, and I feel like you listen to your instincts, it kind of like, that's the GPS system, and the body has this intelligence too. It's not just our psychology, it's the body too, the whole thing. We're just set up for success. So I don't know if I have a question, but I just love to hear about this stuff.
Yeah, no, and I think it's interesting because I used to think of instinct as, oh my God, something's going to eat me.
Right.
Shit. Whereas I see it much more as a neutral quietness, an obvious.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when you're talking about biology and we know what to do, because when I got really quiet at that conference, one of the things I'd always been curious about is why I eat so much chocolate. No, but genuinely, because before I noticed it would be in my mouth, I'm like, oh, where did all that go? I don't know.
Kind of like you.
Yes.
And it was really interesting. I got so quiet for literally weeks. It was really sublime. And then one of the things I got, so what I wanted to do is I wanted to see, so I would imagine if like 10 is crazy Leela, and 0 is, I've never got there yet, but really quiet. I kind of was bobbling at a sort of 2.5, maybe 3, 2.5, 3, which I would see as really quiet. And so I started to notice when the thought chocolate would pop into my head. Like I'd be bibbling along, and I was working from home at the time, and I'd be like, ooh, fancy piece of chocolate. And it was always a mystery to me because it always looked the same, the thought. And then instead of just following eat the chocolate, I'm like, well, what's the feeling of me? And 80% of the time that chocolate popped into my mind, 80%, it was either I was feeling a bit anxious, just feeling a bit nervous about something, or a bit anxious, or just a bit like everything was feeling a bit anxious. Or I was tired, like literally tired. So I thought, oh, interesting. Okay, I know how to deal with anxiety, and I know how to deal with tired. So I'd go and lie down for like literally 4 minutes, and everything with all my cells would kind of rejuvenate and get rested. And I'd get up and I'd say, okay, do I want chocolate? It'd be like, no. I'm like, and then if I got anxious, I'm like, all right, forget the thoughts that are coming. Like, you kind of, I think if you know it's just anxiety, I feel like you know how to soothe and quieten yourself, a bit like if you have a cold. But 20% of the time, I genuinely wanted chocolate. Like, there was really something in there. And, you know, I think I would often eat less and eat usually dark chocolate. I don't know, it was felt almost a little bit more medicinal. So actually, it might even be less than 20%. So you think, gosh, our body is so much, when we're quiet, it gives you quite a good guide as to what to eat and when, and what to drink and when to sleep. And it always feels a lot simpler when we're less in the weeds.
But I mean, that's such a key that you're saying, is that in the quiet we can hear that. And in a sense, in the noise, the coping mechanism is the wisdom for that level of consciousness, which is so interesting and has helped me so much to not judge my behaviors when I know that I'm really sped up, to just sort of have some compassion for whatever's showing up as making sense, but also knowing, as you're saying, that as I settle internally, all of that shifts. And it's such an incredible thing to witness that shift and to see the one-to-one relationship there.
You literally, I think we're in a different world. If we coming out of an 8, you are not on the same planet down at a 3. You literally don't have the same husband, kids, but everything, like whatever. No, right? But like, you're literally not dealing with the same materials.
That's true.
Who are these people? Said that David Byrne song. Is this my beautiful house?
Yeah, I don't know.
So can I ask
No,
a question
absolutely,
now?
yeah.
So Lila, I'd love to hear more about your work that you do in Relationship Ready and what you're seeing around rewilding and people coming back to their natural state, because it sounds very aligned, and but it just also, I'd love to hear it through your lens too.
Gosh, I'm going to try and keep it to not talk too long, because it's such a gorgeous, it's such a gorgeous piece of my life, kind of working in that area. And I'm going to say it like without really babbling on, because
we don't mind if you babble on. I'm sure no one else will. We love what you're sharing.
So much of a backstory to that. But what I think, one of the observations where the rewilding kind of thing, why I started saying that, is that I noticed there was a pattern, and we largely work with, professional, successful, engaged women. They have their life going, they're very engaged with their work, and they have very strong friendship groups, and everything is kind of like moving and going and kind of very satisfying, except for dating. And it's, we kind of help them see that they're not really showing up as themselves on dates. They're showing up with way more mental junk than when people will swear to me. They go, no, I'm really neutral. I'm like, no, you're not. yeah, I got nothing on my mind. I'm like, okay, no, you really don't. It's like, so it's a bit like, how we have these perspex in between us and every single other person now. So you've got it between us and restaurants and everywhere. It's kind of like we're going at this, and thinking can be invisible, like a piece of perspex, like we're getting in the sort of COVID era. So like you're banging up against it, and I'm like, the reason why you're not connecting and getting right to the person on the side is because you have thought. I'm telling you, you do, because when you don't, I cried over my email once because I was so moved by the moment. I mean, it's literally made up that you can't feel connected at any point. So we help people start to see that what the perspex, clear perspex, and help them see what that is so they can show up. And one of the things I noticed, particularly with these very high performance women, is that they're real go-getters, and they've kind of like polished it, man. So they're attractive, they're engaged, they're ready, they've got their tick list, they're not going to make any mistakes like they did last time. They've nailed the formula. They know exactly how high they should be and what kind of career they should be in, and maybe probably everything, because they're basing off, well, don't do that, so do this. So it gets more and more and more like this. And as they show up as themselves, they've also sort of started to manufacture what they think is success and interesting and lovely and engaging and a prize person to date. So they're showing up kind of like, I had a really gorgeous client once, because sometimes people show up and they're very, very nice.
Mm-hmm.
And am I allowed to swear?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I assume so.
You're very nice, but you must also be a bitch and you know, a bit of, sometimes a bit slutty and a bit this and that, but you must be all of these things, right? You must have all of these qualities to you, because like, I know that you're lovely, but what else are you?
Yeah.
You know, like, are you allowed to be all those things? And so I had one client, and I've been speaking to her, and she's just gorgeous, and I get on the phone to her, and she just got a bunch of feeling that's just everything. She's yeah, I'm staying here, it's pissing me off a bit, but it's fine. And she just had all this fresh, different, some of it was feeling a bit pissed off, and some of it was feeling a bit amused, and some, and all of the feeling came back in her. And I said, oh my gosh. Because that morning I'd been at home, and I just taken, I think I'd wiped my daughter's desk, and it's one of those IKEA desks with a laminate top, you know, it's like plastic. And if you run your hand over it, it's very smooth, it's very nice. You can't feel anything. You can't feel anything. And when you, and I'd actually, that same day, I have a big oak antique kitchen table, and the way I oil it is I get organic olive oil. Sounds really Lexi, but didn't want to have, and I put lavender in it, and I put some on the table, and I basically run my bare hands with this lavender and olive oil over the wood and massage it in. And you, as you run your hand over it, you can feel every bump and every kind of like, you know, ding and the grain of the wood. And it's kind of gorgeous. It kind of always slows me down, because I'm like, okay, quickly, and then I just go, oh whoa. I just get really present with it because it's gorgeous. And I said, I think you just turned into an oak table rather than an IKEA desk. Because she was so just herself and not lost in any of the stories, she was very fluid, but she was able to be everything. And it was so, I was just so drawn and felt so close with her. And I could just feel her. It was like, yeah, you know, you want to spend more time with someone like that when they're kind of just themselves. So I noticed, I think that was like maybe a year ago, and I noticed, I just started to see, like, what if you didn't control your garden? Like, what if you weren't some weird rose trimmed, neat, you know, like kind of on Home and Away Australian, you know, the movies, like Australian soaps where it's just precision. Like, what if you weren't? What if you were allowed to be wild? What if you naturally, you grow everything, you have all the feelings? And so so I started talking about, what if you just let yourself be wild in your feelings? What if you go on a date and you feel this and you don't feel that? And you can, if you don't get in a story, you're a fluid, you know, rich bunch of wildflowers. You're a bit of everything.
Yeah.
And so that's really what I've been referring to, because I can feel that people try and have a very presentable, lovely front garden. And, you know, I don't think any of us would want to go on another date with someone if it felt like that. They want to be with someone that is kind of like, you can feel the intrigue and all the different parts of them, and they have different feelings and they come and go. And that's what makes another human being lovely. So that's kind of what, and just this leaving ourselves alone a little bit and not making up a story about everything we think.
Yeah.
Just leaving ourselves to grow and be natural. And one of the other things I see is that it's very common for people to have like the fizzle out factor, because they'll go on a date and then they'll get kind of like start pruning the crap out of it, basically. They might start off with a lovely first date and they're like, ooh, I like him or I like her. And so they start trimming and mowing and they get really intense about it, you know, and it's like, and then the feeling goes out and they're very mystified. They're like, but I really liked it. I'm like, okay, let me see your gardening tools. People, it's really hard for people to not jump ahead. And people will do this, they'll swear to me they're not jumping ahead, and they're like, I'm not. And I'm like, yeah, okay, well, you just told me that you couldn't marry a man who's wearing those trousers. It's your first date. Like, people don't, you know, they don't realize they're jumping ahead. They're trying to imagine rather than letting things unfold. So You know, it's very common for when people first start dating, there's loads of texting and then they meet and then the texting fades out. And I'm like, well, not every part of the garden has a bunch of flowers.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you go through a bit of a pasture and then but if you leave it alone, let's just see what grows on its own if you give it a bit of space. And you'll know. So really kind of encouraging people to have more of an organic experience dating rather than...
So I'm sure you know this. I don't know if it's a term they use in the UK, but here, particularly in America, they will refer to an English garden, you know, in a very positive way. An English garden is a garden that's been left to its own devices, that grows in its own way, and it has a lot of charm. So it's a nice metaphor in a sense. It's like, yeah, here in America, an English garden is a garden that's been left to grow in whatever way it wants to, in a way.
Oh, it's so funny. I think of it the other way. I think of something that's sort of brought in plants and very traditional and organized. I thought of it the other way, but that's interesting. You know, I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah, that is funny. But I love what you're pointing to in terms of people just being themselves and being in the full range of themselves is intriguing. It is interesting. It is spicy. It's, you know, there's an aliveness there that is so compelling and really also I would imagine helps with the sorting process of dating, because if there's someone that's really fully being themselves, like, I'm not interested, then, you know, and you get to have room for whoever else might be interested. So it just, I think that, and also what you were saying about how the women that you work with have, you know, they're very successful and they've, you know how to be successful in a lot of areas of their life. They've had a lot of time to get strategic about things. And when I think about, you know, not that I did a ton of dating because we met when I was quite young, but it's like there was none of that. Like in my 20s, I'm just a mess. I couldn't even bother to be keeping it together. In a sense, it's like, yeah, you got what you got. So, but I can see how the more capable and successful we get, we might want to try and impose that in other areas, and that can get in the way, like you're saying, with that piece of perspex.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't have many gardening tools on the dating game, that's for sure. As far as I can remember.
Yeah.
Mine were pretty crude.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I mean, I was like, when Aaron and I got together, I was 21, which now I consider a child bride.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I didn't have all these areas of my that looked successful because I was still in college, but I had my art was engaging, and then I was loving fashion, and I found dating quite disappointing because I was a little bit too antsy to really settle down. So I talk about it like sort of disappointing Christmas gifts. It's a horrible thing to say, isn't it? Like, oh, thanks. It looks so pretty on the outside. I mean, it was totally down to me, but I did come in at 21 with a lot of dating armor. I came in with a lot of thoughts. I mean, I saw my mom and her friends complain about men and, you know, they'll never understand you and they're from Mars and we're from Venus. I mean, I heard all these things and I thought that was just because they were really old, you know, 14 or whatever, when I was listening to them. Probably from about 9, I think I remember really listening. And as a kid, I think you do sort of think, oh, you have part of your brain goes, okay, check, that's how to be an adult. And the other part of you is like, that looks stupid. So I think I was kind of doing both. That looks stupid. At some point, I kind of, when I started to feel hurt or shame or all these experiences in the relationship, because I'd had 2 serious relationships before Aaron, and I just went in with how not to get screwed over, like how to get taken advantage of, like how, you know, you success if you don't get manipulated or insulted or whatever. And I didn't even have I had one beep a boyfriend, but the rest were really nice guys, and I still managed to pick up all of these how not to's. And I kind of think I had a moment of welcome to adulthood. Oh yeah, this is my mom's friends were right. In order to be a strong woman, you have to be aggressive and take your rights. And I just started to realize, okay, you have to be proactive if you don't want to get, you know, so I think actually I gave up dating before I met Aaron. I was like, this is such a waste of time. 21, I was like jaded. I was like, probably why I met Aaron, because I just thinking, right? I was like, fine, whatever. I'll
Yeah.
do other stuff, you know. Wasn't
Yeah.
very
So
good at.
often happens that way when we've given up the show
Yeah,
up.
it is fascinating to think about it though. That when you go on a date, let's say in my very distant past, ancient history now for me, but the dates that would be successful, the dates where you feel like this feels so natural and comfortable, and I feel like I can totally be myself here. I can put all the gardening tools to one side and just show up. This is who I am, and either like it or lump it. Those would be the good dates when you can just be yourself, and the conversation can flow from there. But I definitely feel like, yeah, absolutely. I had my gardening tools and I was looking at their garden and I'm like, who's got the better garden here? And constant state of comparison, that checklist definitely in play. So it's such a brilliant metaphor. But yeah, if I think about it, I felt that, the dates that would work are the dates where, I'm just showing up and being myself, and for them too. That's the comfort zone.
Yeah. Angus always teases me because I think he always puts it down to me being Canadian. I don't think it's anything to do with Canadian, but he says I was just so forward because I asked him out. But then I was thinking about dating, probably because we were going to have this conversation, and I realized the guy I went out with before you was even way more extreme than anything I did with you, because he was a professor. I was a student, and I just had this really strong feeling inside of me. And so one day I, marched into his office in office hours and just told him how I felt about him. And he was just completely shocked and told me, in no uncertain terms that was not appropriate. And so I went through the mortification and the rejection of that. And by that night, we were basically kissing on the way home from the pub. We ended up going
graceful behavior
for 2 years, I think, after that. But it was just, I think for me, one of the things that I never really realized that I was forward until you told me I was forward.
Well, I think what was so refreshing is the honesty.
Yeah.
That wasn't necessarily that had never really been my experience in the dating pool, as it were. Is to show up and feel like, here is someone that's just really comfortable being themselves and showing up from there, speaking from their heart. And that wasn't my experience. It's like, keep your cards close to your chest, follow the checklist implicitly.
And now maybe there's a pattern, because when I asked Angus out, he said no too. Anyway, but we did manage
that's a
to
whole
get
other
together.
story.
Yeah. So is there anything else you want to say more about that work? Because I know that's, so rich and such a huge topic for people. So if there's any other pearls of wisdom that you have on your mind, I'm sure the group would be grateful to hear.
I could literally talk forever about it. I was just thinking as you were talking, I think I was the motto for Relationship Ready really is that the most natural version of you is the upgrade. People don't realize that when they don't have a lot on their mind, not only are they intuitive, intelligent, and know whether to date someone, whether not to, but that is the upgrade. Like, that's the upgrade. Whereas we try and prune ourselves to be some kind of, perfect thing. And that's actually not what anyone's looking for. And I think there's, depending that, I see different patterns. Like I see some people find it easy to get into them, but then they fizzle out, or they have a shelf life, or I find some people find them impossible to get into, and then they get into them and then they're lonely. And so one of the really common for people to be lonely in a relationship because of how they think, they get very lonely. And I think I was always very myself in the sort of flirting stage, because I didn't have anything on it. I didn't care, like I might like them, but didn't think I was going to marry them. It's like it'd usually be more than one person that I thought was kind of cute. It wasn't a big thing, so I would be very comfortable in that. And then I think as soon as you got together and I started thinking, we're in a relationship now, I started to think differently, and then became not myself. So it wasn't myself. And I think that's a really common pattern, that people don't know how to just be themselves in a relationship. Really common. And it's really interesting, because when I tell people what I do, 50% say, oh, I've got a friend who should do that. And the other 50% say, I've got a friend who's with someone, but they should do that. Because a lot of people are in them and they're ambiguous. They don't feel connected to themselves. They don't free to be themselves. And in a way, they're not clear enough to know whether to leave or go. So they're like the worst bomb disposal person ever. Go say, I don't know. So, you know, I see lots of patterns, but I think learning to be myself within a relationship and not, I don't think about my relationship now as a commitment. I don't even see it as a relationship. I remember the first argument I had with Aaron after we got married. Before we got married, we were boyfriend and girlfriend, we'd have a fight, whoa, make it up. And then we got married, and it was like, oh my God, we had a fight. I literally had the words, I'm in this marriage. This marriage. I was like 25. Look at this marriage now. And all my family loved it. Like, ooh, drama, let's take you to therapy. And I was like, eh. You know what was interesting is my sister said to me, and she doesn't know this is such a gift, she says, oh, don't worry, Lily, you're just over the honeymoon phase. Mm. And again, I had my brain split into a split screen, and part of me went, what? Oh shit, we're over that. That's a bummer. Then it's going to be like this. Do I want that? And but then the actual larger part, which was kind of split screen here, said that can't be. I didn't know about. I mean, we were around the principles, but it was Aaron who was learning. I wasn't. I was like, it can't be, because the only thing that happened was a piece of paper. Because a minute ago, how can you go? How that doesn't make any sense to me. It has to be that I'm thinking a certain way. And so I decided to not live like I was married in a way, because it gave me sort of quite heavy lead coat thinking. That makes sense. It was that was out without almost no understanding of the principles, just to go, oh, that doesn't make sense. And as soon as I went, the curiosity of that doesn't make sense, instead of the screen being 50-50, it went to sort of 99%. Doesn't make sense, and I'm not going to choose that, to pop 100%. And it doesn't mean we didn't fight about mess for 18 years, but I didn't think about it in that way, in terms of it being a problem, you know?
Yeah. And that's
I know.
profound. No, that's profound, that shift in seeing that was made up, like that was thought. Like that's amazing to be able to see that at that age and at that time, that the only thing that happened was how you thought about it.
Yeah, we just and to have so little understanding myself, I just have luckily had these freer moments to go, that doesn't make sense. And I didn't know why it didn't really make sense. All I know is it didn't make sense. And there's always the nagging thing that wants to tell you, no, it's terrible, you know. And one of the biggest blessings I think I feel now, since I've been doing this work, is that if it's pants, if our relationship is a little bit damp and pissy, not very often, but we went through a phase of feeling unkind. Felt like, you know, I was like, and I remember driving home from the gym and I was like, Aaron, I think we stopped feeling kind. Because it's not like us, but I know that when one person asked the other person to do something, it sort of went on the scoreboard. Okay, folded laundry, tick. Then they had, you know, like a tab. And it was really unusual for us, because it wasn't just, sure, I can help you, no problem. Like, it wasn't this effortless. It started going on, yeah, well, what have you done? Well, what have you done? Just so unlike us. And I was like, wow, we lost kindness. And he's in the car and we're driving back. It was like 7 a.m. and he goes, yeah, you're right. Interesting. That was the end of it. Because as soon as we saw we'd lost kindness, it didn't miraculously disappear, but over the next few weeks, it sort of dissolved. But one of the things I've got so grateful for, like literally kiss the ground, Pope style, thank you, is that I don't worry anymore. Like if it's a bit rubbish, I don't go, oh my God, my relationship, what's going on? Does it, you know, I don't start worrying there's something wrong. I just think, and which is really, I feel so grateful for that, because a lot of my disturbed, you know, a lot of energy got used up worrying whether something might be wrong.
Yeah. It's very consuming. I used to spend a lot of time worrying about what was wrong and then putting energy in trying to fix it, which only made things worse, it seemed.
Yeah, I love the idea of like running a tab. Because for sure I've done that. The amount of times I've made cups of tea and it hasn't been reciprocated, or
I don't keep
however
a
I
tab,
do
you
it.
do.
I guess so. That's
I'm
such
like,
a
what?
brilliant term.
Yeah, that's good.
And a tab, it takes management. It's taking up bandwidth. It's just creating more turmoil.
Yeah.
Why would I do that?
It's a lot of effort
Yeah.
to keep adding things
Yeah.
to it and track it.
You know, my head for math as well. It's like stress.
It's like wearing a lead vest, isn't it? I feel like it's
Yeah.
like wearing a lead vest in your relationship because
Mhm.
everything felt heavy. Okay, I'll do that for you, and fine, you're doing that for me, and it just everything felt like a lead vest, like, and I wasn't getting any fitter. I wasn't even getting rude, and I just not wanting to sort of live in that feeling was really nice to go. Oh,
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense. And sometimes I don't know. It's a bit like a flu. It'll take a little while to pass, or consciousness only hadn't fully taken over the screen, whatever, you know. Right.
No, that's great. And to be able to take that vest off and experience the difference, and when you're in that freer place, is just so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great, Lila. I've loved this exploration with you, and I really appreciate, you know, that full range of relationship, from the looking at those very beginning stages and seeing how at some point there's that decision somewhere along the line that we can make to not be ourselves, and that ultimately it's when we relax and let ourselves just be who we are that we're going to have much more enjoyment ourselves, but also get different results in our life. And there's one thing that you've said, you know, several times, where you have that question that comes up that, you know, that just doesn't make sense. Like, you've listened to that and you've paid attention to that, and that's what's counter the conditioning. That's what's counter all of that grooming and trimming, is there's that knowing inside of us that we have when something just doesn't quite line up with that. So I love how you've given that airtime and really allowed that to, you know, without necessarily any specific formal understanding, that you've trusted your instincts on that.
I feel like it wasn't until about a year ago I was working with a client, and we were talking about wisdom, and I didn't realize until this moment, but I feel like, you know, when you have a proper ambulance, but then you have the first responder. Right. So my son got really sick when he was little, and the local kind of volunteer people came in who was so excited for something to be happening because it was a tiny town. And then the proper ambulance came. But I feel like the first responder, not like the ones I'm referring to there because they were chaotic, but the first responder is always wisdom. And I hadn't realized this. Before you have time to think, it comes up between the gaps and responds with wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do your thinking. So the most stark example I have of that was my mum, when I was about 15, and I was very, you know, teenager. So I was crying, hormones, and I'm kind of like, you know, I don't know, sensitive anyway. And she said, "Oh, don't worry, darling, you're just manic depressive like me," or something, and sort of patted me on the head.
That's really
And
right.
no, but it was really interesting because if you talk about a split screen, it wasn't a split screen. It was this first response that came up really clear, and it really kind of in a way stood up for me and said, "That's not true. You're fine."
Mm-hmm.
Like, with such certainty.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did my, "Oh, I wonder if it's true."
Yeah.
But it didn't take away from the knowing. And it's really interesting. I always knew I wasn't, but I kind of thought, well, if we're that together, then maybe I would be loved more. So I sort of behaved that way, I think. And it's not her fault. She was trying to be loving and help me understand my hormones and emotions, and trying to put it in a kind of more impersonal way, I think. So I think for her, it was an act of affection, but quite a heady one. But I just think it's fascinating that we can have a first responder of wisdom. It tells us, and then you'll do, and the yes, but, and the what if. But sometimes that voice is so clear that the what ifs just peter out. They don't touch the side. It's just lame. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit pathetic attempt, you know. I realized when I was talking through with that client, I was like, oh my God, there has never been a time ever that I didn't have a first responder of wisdom, ever. I felt it, even if I didn't hear it explicitly. You know, whether it's don't go with them or go talk to, you know, it's like it's like just this gap that we have where it's just running all the time. It's there, but then you do your personal thinking about it. I just think that's
I
fascinating.
love
It
that.
is. It's kind of, yeah, all I don't speak for myself, talking myself out of my wisdom. I can think of, the time when I was a photographer in the days where, you had contact sheets, it wasn't digital. And I would get, say, let's say 20 contact sheets and get very excited because certain shots would just stand out. Oh, there it is. That's brilliant. That's a brilliant picture that can go in the magazine. And then that would be in the lab, and then I'd take the contact sheets back to the apartment, and I'd go through them again, and I would talk myself out of every single picture that I thought was going to be the hero shot, and then probably spend the next 2 days going down, finding fault in each and every one of them, even the ones that were second and third choices. And quite often I would go back to that first choice because that was always the best picture. But it's amazing how I would put myself through that turmoil. And I can see myself doing that in all sorts of other areas of my life. You have that gut initial instinct, that moment of wisdom that's kind of prompting you to do something. And then the analytical machinery comes in, which if it's subjected to my mood that may be low, it's kind of like it's getting me into all kinds of trouble where I'm going to not listen to that voice or that prompt. And I think everybody has those examples.
Yeah, I love your metaphor of the first responder. I'm
That's
going to remember
brilliant.
that. That's going to
Yeah.
definitely stick with me. And it's funny how I'm so good, and I think people in general are so good at listening to that wisdom and that first responder in certain areas of life, and then in other areas of life where they have just a lot more conditioning or thinking about it, they don't even like, no, I can't trust that first responder. Let me listen to all of the intellectual analytics and strategy, because that's what I'm going to go by here. It reminds me of you saying, Angus, recently you said, when the stakes feel high, that's when the ego wants to be in the driving seat most, and that's when
Ego
we
wants
need
to
to
be in the
swing
wheel
back.
in that situation. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, Leila, we're at time, and we want to thank you so much for spending this time with us and sharing what you're seeing with your group. And I know that you're going to send us your bio information, so I'll include that in the email. So if people want to reach out or connect with you, they can. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like we just barely scratched the surface.
I know.
This is maybe part one. We should have 2, 3 and in ad infinitum with you. I think you're so articulate, and you're definitely the queen of metaphor. So I really enjoy speaking with you. It's fun.
Sorry, my screen went strong. It's so lovely to. I feel like it's just like a kind of regular tea thing. I really liked it. It was really nice chatting with you guys. I don't get
Yeah.
enough reasons to hang out with you guys. It's been
Yeah.
lovely. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're
And there was like a
welcome.
zillion things we were going to talk about, but another time. It was lovely.
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
absolutely.
I think Angus is right. It's like if you're open to having tea with us again, we'd love to have you.
Definitely.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, take care. Give our
Thanks.
love to Aaron too.
Yeah, love to Aaron.
All right. Thanks so
Thanks.
much. Have a good
Bye.
evening. Bye.
Bye.